Hello and welcome to my postcard from the past from the beautiful Canary Island of La Palma. Well, actually it's not from the beautiful Canary Island of La Palma, is it? Because if it was, I'd have to be there sending it, and I'm not, unfortunately. But anyway, it's about the island of La Palma, and in particular about the petroglyphs of La Palma. As you can see from the map there, La Palma is kind of northwest of the Canary Islands. It's not very well visited. I don't know obviously how many people watching this have been there, but many people have been to Tenerife, Gran Canaria, and some of the other islands, maybe not La Palma. Important to recognise on the lower map there where it is in relation to the rest of the world. So here is La Palma. It is a beautiful place. It is the closest place to paradise I've ever been. Especially in the middle of winter for someone like me who lives in the North Pennines. But mainly, and the reason why I first went there is because of the quite extraordinary petroglyphs that you can see all over the island. It's not very big. You can see it's dominated by this vast caldera, the Caldera Tobo Oriente in the north of the island. And then there's this kind of string of volcanoes coming down to the south. You can see the built-up areas towards the centre and around the coast. You can see the roads, very, very windy roads. One main road around the coast, one through the middle, which goes through a tunnel. It's about 700 square kilometres, which is roughly a third the size of County Durham, or in terms of islands, you might be more familiar with, almost exactly the same size as Anglesey, which also has very interesting archaeology, but a bit different. And there's just an idea of what it looks like flying around the south, looking along a kind of the line of volcanoes up the central spine towards the huge, great big caldera towards the north edge. It is, according to the tourist documentation, the steepest island in the world, because it goes from obviously sea level right up to 2.4 kilometers, as we will see during this presentation. And I should say as well, this is a postcard, of course, and you can't write very much on a postcard. So I'm probably going to say far too much, but we'll have to whiz through and resist the temptation to go into anything in any great detail. And I will do, because I know lots of people are interested in this, I will do a more detailed presentation later and make that available online too. The island is best known for its observatory, telescopes from various nations, right up at the highest point at 2.4 kilometers up on top of the north rim of the caldera. And that was when I first visited it at the bottom. You forget how high up you are, and the clouds just rolled in and the temperature went down by about 10 degrees in about 5 seconds. It was just a completely extraordinary place. I could easily fill up these few minutes with pictures of the island and just how beautiful it is. The top image there's nothing looking from there until you get to Bermuda, just open ocean, fantastic sunsets. And at the bottom image, you might just see on the horizon Haiti, which is of course on Tenerife. And that's from, as the sign tells you, a height of 2,136 meters, which is very close to one of the rock art sites that I'll talk about a bit later. And it is extraordinary that obviously the top view is of the sea and the bottom view is from right high up on top of the caldera. And sometimes you can be completely confused thinking you're looking at the sea when you're up on the top, and you're not. Of course, you're looking down on the clouds. I'll try not to wander on about it, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. But of course, what we're here to talk about is the archaeology. And the island takes its archaeology really seriously, and it's fantastic to see how much effort is being put into the management of sites and the interpretation of them. And this amazing museum in Los Llanos, which is the largest town on the island, not the capital, but the largest town, tells the story of the native people who go by two different names, Oritas or Benahoritas, we'll call them Oritas, And we know that the original settlement was probably around about 300 BC, must have come from Northwest Africa. And the island was conquered by the Spanish in 1493. And there's a quite sad story about how the last king of the island was divided into 12 different territories, and the last to hold out was in the Caldera, and the last king was betrayed by one of his supposed mates who'd just become a Christian and siding with the Spanish, betrayed him, and he was shipped off to Spain, but refused to eat once he'd left Palma and died on the boat. So it's all very sad, and there's a whole different story there about empires and such like, and the ending of native traditions. But we can be fairly sure on that basis that the rock art, whatever date it is, dates from between 300 BC and 1493, which of course means it's very different in age from our rock art in England. And you must not think for one moment that there was any connection at all between Northeast England and La Palma, because there wasn't. But what's interesting about it is that it has similarities to our rock art. And I firmly believe that by studying the petroglyphs of La Palma, we can gain some new ideas about the way we study our rock art in England. You'll notice I'm using the words petroglyphs sometimes and rock art other times. Well, when I talk to, well, I try to talk to people, but my Spanish is so rubbish, as will be clear from my pronunciation of some places in this little talk. When I talk to people over there, very often they've never heard the term rock art. Talk about rock art. What rock art? They're called petroglyphs, which is, of course, what they are. We use the term rock art, which is open to all sorts of criticism, but we'll not worry about that for the purposes of a postcard. So that's the museum. Also, when I was last there, there's another museum opened on the northeast coast of the island, it's called Endal, which is this new building that you can see with a great big window, and you look out of the window across at some caves on the other side of that valley. And those caves have been partially excavated, and lots of interesting things found, which are on display, some of which are on display in the museum. But what's really interesting is that some paleoenvironmental work has been done. And it seems that during the first millennium, the people of La Palma were definitely practicing agriculture. Several barley grains dated, radiocarbon dated to the first millennium. But there's a suggestion that they gave up on agriculture and just became herders and gatherers of wild produce, which is a kind of really interesting thing that to an extent has been suggested for the British Neolithic as well. How do you forget or make a conscious decision to give up agriculture? I don't know. Anyway, I'm talking too much for just a postcard. What I'm going to do is talk through 5 rock art sites, which are, as you can see from here, distributed throughout the island from the north and the south. The first one, Lazazo, is probably the best known one. It's also the one that feels most like home, because every time I've been there, it's been raining. Kind of quite dated. I discovered it in the 1940s, I think. And the displays, there's an interpretation centre there, which is great, but not as fancy as some of the new ones that they've got elsewhere on the island. And you go along a little walk through some woods. It's a bit muddy, not what you'd expect to see in the Canary Islands, and you come to these glyph faces. And well, so what, you might think. But when you start looking at those glyph faces, you start to notice that parts of them are covered in these extraordinary spiral and concentric ring curvilinear markings, and there's some at the top there that are still on the natural outcrop, and there are some large blocks which presumably have fallen at the bottom, like that one that you can see at the bottom there, and beautiful decoration. There has been. Well, I don't speak Spanish. I can't read Spanish, so I struggle with the detail of these, just what I can pick up. But there has been an excavation in the area of a settlement, which doesn't obviously date the rock art, but about 1200 AD, which might be right for the rock art. And the site sits at a sort of a confluence of trackways from the lowlands up to the highlands, and is was possibly visited on a seasonal basis. Interpretation talks of the lush vegetation and water being so important, the sort of earthly spirit, and yeah, probably, who knows, we haven't got time to talk about what the carvings mean. Interestingly, on the right-hand side, you'll see that there are two very distinctive styles of carving. There are kind of cruder spirals towards the bottom, or concentric circles, and then this amazing design higher up. So that's the first site, but probably the one you're most likely to come across. I remember seeing a picture of one of those in a book when I was an undergraduate and thinking, God, isn't that amazing? I'd like to go there one day. I'm lucky enough to be there several times now. What a place this is. La Arita, right high up on the rim of the caldera. You might just be able to see on the far side on the horizon a couple of white blobs, if you can, there through the telescopes, right up on the horizon. But we're looking at these rocks, which is right on the rim. This is the ground goes steeply down to either side into the caldera to the left, and towards the coast to the right. And the rocks that you can see in the middle there do have carvings on. It's just amazing. You can sit there and watch the caldera filling up with cloud. They're taken on two different occasions. You'll see there's a kind of stone spiral arrangement in the middle on the upper one that had been cleared away by the authorities by the time that the second one was taken, probably 2 or 3 years later. But the rock art on these is not as spectacular as some of the others, but you can see perhaps most clearly the large spiral, partial spiral toward the bottom right hand corner. I don't know why I'm sitting there pointing at it, because that's stupid. But anyway, never mind. And you can see some other little markings on those other sites there. And there are some little, what we would call in this country sheilings, what look like little temporary settlements in the area too. So clearly people were going right up on top of the rim of the caldera and were making rock art there for whatever reason. Last time I was there, a couple of years ago, I was amazed to find, because I didn't know about it, that there was an interpretation centre for the rock art at a place called El Paso. And it's one of the biggest concentrations of rock art that there is there. And it's full of these panels with amazing photographs and occasional finds, bits of rock art, a nighttime photograph taken there at the bottom right, which is fantastic. But it sits in just on the south of the caldera at a real concentration of rock art sites. One of which is this one, which is called sometimes El Cementerio because it's next to the cemetery, and sometimes El Verde, and or Verde, I'm sure I pronounce that. And you can see there are some rock shelters, and then at the bottom you can see again fantastic carvings of spirals and other concentric motifs. And there is, I've managed to work out a suggestion that that's linked to the summer solstice, because it sits at the end of a little valley. And you can see the shadow coming across the upper image, and apparently there is a link there with the summer solstice, but I can't say anything about that in any detail. And just very close to that site is another in the kind of El Paso concentration, which, well, those of you familiar with Irish passage grave art, a lot of that wouldn't look out of place in Irish passage grave. But I say again, it is absolutely nothing to do with it. The same motifs are being created thousands of years later in different contexts. But it's, for me, fascinating that these such similar motifs are created at different times in different places. The last one site to look at is a place called Belmarco, which is the first one I visited. It's a cave, as you can see. And these were the first of the La Palma petroglyphs to be discovered in, I think it was 1752. And there were excavations in the 1950s and the 1970s. And it's quite hard to photograph because of the light. But on some of the very large blocks of stone, which I assume have fallen from up above the shelter, you have the same thing again, just wavy lines, concentric circles, and spirals. And this was one of the sites, along with Tendal that I mentioned before, where some environmental work had been done on the samples from the excavations. And again, it seems as though, well, agriculture was practiced in the first millennium, but then people seem to have focused much more on, if not entirely, on natural produce and on herding livestock towards the end of the occupation, perhaps in the early second millennium. And finally, it's a very long postcard, finally this place, which is the Telegear, which is right on the south coast. And there was a volcanic eruption here in 1971, I think, which is why the landscape is so black. But this extraordinary pink rock sticks right up out of the blackness against the sea. And if you're looking for special places in the landscape, then they don't come much more special than this. You can see in the bottom pictures the kind of pinkishness of the rock. If you walk up to that Telegear and have a look at it, you realize that a very large proportion of its exposed rock is covered in these beautiful, mysterious curvilinear motifs again. There's a spiral there to the right, and then this sort of more complex decoration. I can't remember how many I've got to show you. Oh, there's an idiot sat there in the bottom image, but it should, just pointing to a really well preserved bit of decoration there. And but at the top and on the right hand side, you can see that, well, I hope you can see, depends on what a screen you're looking at this on. There's an awful lot of decoration there, which is fading away rather worryingly. And I think if there's anywhere that deserves or demands a very detailed modern survey to record it before it all fades away, then it's that place. So that's been rather long for just a postcard. Oh, look at that, what a place. If you've no interest in archaeology, if you've no interest in petroglyphs, rock art, it's still the most beautiful place to spend some time. If, like me, you are interested in rock art, then it's just about the most perfect place that you can go to spend some time. I will, as I say, do a more detailed presentation about this at some point and make it available. So I hope you've found that of some interest. Thank you. Bye-bye.